Welcome back to the sweatshop, boys and girls. In today's video, we're going to be working on this 2006 Subaru WRX. Well, boys and girls, today's video is a little bit different. I didn't really have a plan of filming this. I just had an issue with the exhaust that I was supposed to take care of, and the vehicle, of course, needed to go on my hoist. Of course, putting it on the hoist exposed a bunch of issues that the customer was unaware of. He complained of a few noises, and we found out what those noises were. And the purpose of this video is to show you that it is very important to educate yourself on what you're looking at when you're looking at your car, and why it's important to look at your car from time to time, generally after service at a mechanic, because not all mechanics are made from the same mold, and that, my friends, can be quite distressing, especially when I show you what I found on this thing. Of course, before I show you what I found, boys and girls, do me a big favor, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss one of my new videos. All right, let's get started, put this thing up in the air. This here, boys and girls, was the original complaint. It was an exhaust leak, which we of course had to put the car up on the hoist for. And of course, being a good mechanic, I started looking at stuff as I usually do. Well, it depends on the day, but today I had a little bit of extra time, started looking at stuff, and I'm glad I did, because this, boys and girls, is, well, the very least of problems that we have with this car. So, boys and girls, for those of you with eyes that work, will see that there are a few things in this picture that don't appear to be right. This here is an old brake line that is still attached to the car. Now, it wasn't situated in this position when I originally looked at it. I bent it out of the way. However, it was situated somewhere about here, and the sort of noise that you just heard on camera there, clicking noise or clunking noise, is the sort of noise that the customer asked me about when we put the car up on the hoist. So of course I started to poke around, and looky here, boys and girls. Oh, yeah, that's the brake hose that has been kind of just jangling around here. But don't worry, it gets even better. Check this out, boys and girls. We have here what is called a shiny spot, and that's because something has been stroking the shaft here. Of course, that's not the effect you would like on a CV. Now we have to discover what has been touching the CV shaft. Looky here, boys and girls, our brake line looks like it has a nice spot that's been touched as well. Well, I dirtied it now and it doesn't look like it's being touched, but you gotta have to trust me here. It's all worn away. Well, that's not even the worst part. You can see here, boys and girls, it's even more worn away. This one here has actually gone past the rubber layer to the secondary layer of this brake hose. Yeah. I know what you're thinking. Is this a DIY job because it looks so piss poor, right? Well, no, this was done by a supposed professional with a mechanic's license. We won't mention the shop's name, partly because I don't know it and I don't want to have any issues that tissues won't solve later for deformation and the rest of that sort of joyful stuff. But unfortunately, this is the sort of crap that you at home realistically have to be made aware of. You can't rely on certain mechanics. And like I say, boys and girls, the most important thing, you gotta trust the mechanic that you go to, and they should be okay with making mistakes, or at least owning up to their mistakes and then correcting them. The customer could have had his goddamn brakes fail altogether, and, you know, God forbid he lost his braking and then ends up in a ditch, or, you know, gets badly hurt or doesn't make it past the crash. Then what happens? And even that, if you do get past the crash and you hit someone from behind, well, what happens to your insurance? You don't want to deal with the aftermath of someone's bullshit because you paid them to do their job, and because they couldn't do it properly, it shouldn't become your problem. So the purpose of this video today is not to show you how to correct this, but mainly for you to understand that if you're not a fan of this sort of content and whatnot, you don't necessarily have to, but it is important for you consumers out there to really educate yourself, because for mechanics like myself, we often see stuff like this. It's pathetic. This customer got taken for a ride for $200 for brake lines. I don't even know where they may have joined the brake lines or what they might have done, but this is pathetic, and it shouldn't have left a shop, especially a shop that is a licensed mechanic shop. It really pisses me off being in the industry, especially in the Toronto region. This is something that is seen all too often. And really the only way that it gets stopped is if consumers are aware of what's going on underneath their cars. Because I'm pretty sure there's not one person out there who would be accepting of this sort of repair and would be happy to pay the $200 that was required from this young customer there to pay to have this so-called repair done on his car. Okay, boys and girls, so hopefully you never have to attempt a repair after a supposed repair, because that's just not the way things should be. But in case you have to, the process for taking care of brake lines, or what they should look like essentially, is what I'm going to try and walk you through today. Yeah, it's rather infuriating, to be honest, to see this sort of shit. Nonetheless, rip your tire off your car. At least that's not super fucking heavy. Now, surprisingly on this side, the only real issue is that we have our hard line that is being touched. Now, the only reason this is happening is because whoever did this job was, I don't know, maybe partially blind or mildly retarded. At the end of the day, this here should not be coming into contact with anything. And as you can see, because of its position, it's coming into contact here with our brake hose. And you can't have this guy coming into contact with anything. It's meant to be free. So if you're attempting brake lines at home, always make sure you try to pattern bend your new brake line to the old brake line. And if you don't have one to reference, make sure it is not going to come into contact with anything. Because if it does and the brake line gets severed for whatever reason, you're going to lose brakes, and it's just a dangerous situation that you really don't want to put up with. What we're going to need to do is, well, we're going to have to try and shift this line over, and I'm hoping that it's copper nickel, but I can't really see. It's just coated in crap. If it's copper nickel line, it's relatively easy to bend. If it's steel hard line, it's going to be a lot harder, but essentially you should be able to bend it by hand. As for this guy here, there's not much to do in terms of adjustment for the hose. They actually look like they didn't screw that up. So all we need to do is remove this and set it in here properly, and then make sure that it's not jangling around all willy-nilly, because yeah, that's not cool. Third thing we're going to have to do on this side, boys and girls, is remove this stuff. You don't necessarily have to remove every bit of the old brake line. I myself don't, but I do get rid of stuff that's going to chafe on anything or that's going to contact anything. This here is just pathetic to leave something like this. Cut it out. You can use the brake lines to sometimes on certain cars, because it is really hard to get brake lines done. And you know, yes, you can remove a gas tank to replace a brake line, but there's also a limit to how much a customer can spend and how much time you want to invest and how much of a headache you want to give yourself as well as the customer whenever doing brake lines. They're not an easy job, and it's very labor intensive on most vehicles, especially unibody, you know, smaller sedans like this. It's not easy. What we're gonna do now, we're gonna cut this guy out, take care of this and this. I'm gonna try to stop rambling so much. When my brain's heated, I want to call this shop and tell them off, but there's really no point to that. So realistically, boys and girls, there is no real science to this. Essentially, we're just trying to correct the issue that the previous so-called mechanic has created for us. So what we're trying to do now is just move this portion of the brake line forward behind here. We're trying to loop it around and tuck it in towards the frame. Now, this isn't ideal. I don't recommend doing this, and we will of course have to keep an eye on the brakes to make sure they don't end up leaking, because we can damage the seal here. And now what I'm looking for is to see whether this portion here is bending, or if this here, the flare seal, is moving. If the flare is moving, it is gonna leak. If the pipe is bending, which isn't the ideal situation, but because of our situation that we have, we don't really have much choice. I don't want to take all of this apart to service it, because it's just gonna add way too much to this young man's bill who needs it for school, so he can get the hell out of the GTA and afford a house, because today's housing market is bullshit. I'm sure if you're in Toronto, you completely understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, okay, so it looks like it's just the pipe that's bending, which is nice. Yeah, the sad thing is, boys and girls, after paying $200, I should not have to do this shit. You know, this is fucking ridiculous. We're gonna try and Wrap this guy around here a bit more. I'm pretty sure almost nobody's gonna have to do this at home. But realistically, if you do, for whatever reason, because it seems to be that my trade continuously every year just gets worse and worse and we get more shit working in the trade as opposed to mechanics, you wanna make sure that this guy doesn't leak. And if you ever have to take this apart, it's going to be a real pain in the ass and you're gonna have to adjust it. So just be aware of that. Now your rule here is essentially you wanna make sure that you have at least a 1/4 inch of room around your hardline as well as your brake hose. More so on the brake hose side because of course it is flexible and you don't want it, you know, flapping around in the wind. At least a 1/4 inch because you never know what may come into contact with it. Most times it doesn't move, but you don't want to find out the hard way that it is moving and lose your brakes. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna get a cutoff wheel, a death wheel, as most of you guys will know if you've watched my videos in the past, and we're gonna cut this little shit right off here and get rid of it. I'm assuming that other mechanics' paychecks must have gotten cut off at some point because his work is so spectacular. Grab your death wheel, make sure you wear some safety glasses, boys and girls, because, well, God gave you 2 eyes, but it's better with 2 than it is with 1. That took all of about 5 seconds. So yeah, not very hard at all. And definitely worth doing. So this shit doesn't collide with stuff. The absolute best advice I can give you here, boys and girls, is probably not to touch your brake lines at home. It's not the hardest of jobs, but you need a lot of know-how, skill, and attention to detail when doing brake lines. Otherwise, you end up with shit like this. Now, we need to reposition the camera so you guys can see how I'm gonna position this thing back into place. Okay, boys and girls, so on this side, we're lucky to have this clip. Unfortunately, they didn't leave the clip on the other side. I don't know why. Anyhow, what you're gonna do is grab a vice grip, boys and girls. You're gonna sneak it in here on the lip, and you're just gonna try and work it back and forth. Try and wiggle this guy out of here. There we go. Now, of course, if you're in the situation where we are in, it should be very easy to get out because it wasn't held in by really anything. The person was obviously an idiot because they banged this in order to hold the stupid tab in there. This, my friends, goes on this side of the bracket. You slide it in like so. Okay, I hope this idiot was watching and he's not touching cars anymore for a living. Of course, he fucking bent it, so I need to bend it back because I can't fit my brake hose in there. Get my pry bar. Give that a smash. Slide this guy back in there. Let's see if we can get it seated. Now, you'll see here there is a little bit of a hex sort of pattern. That hex pattern is supposed to sit on this side of the shock here. With it nice and flat against the shock, you then take this here, a spring clip is what these are called, or at least what I call them, and then you slide it in. There is a bevel slot there on the brake hose. That slot is how it retains this hose into the shock. And the spring clip, this side here, goes toward the brake hose on this side so that it pushes up against it. If you put it in like this, it's stupid. And then you're acting like the other person who worked on this car. So don't act like that guy. Grab your hammer and give it a tap, tap, tap. There you go. We done. See? That is what you're supposed to have. Now this shit isn't gonna flap all over the goddamn place, and there's no possible way for it to come into contact with the CV shaft. Now what I need to do is take a look on the backside here to see whether this portion of the hose is rubbing anywhere, either on the frame or on the shock, and it doesn't appear to be because this guy banged on this piece here that holds it, and if you mess the alignment up, you end up with issues that tissues won't solve. So, boys and girls, as you can see here on the driver's side, we have a whole new issue. The brake line is, well, supposed to be here. It was there. I moved it from there because it was pigtailed or curly-tailed, whatever you want to call it, around like this. You can see here, this here is not the way your brake line is supposed to be. Essentially, you don't want to do this because you're going to cause this thing to wear out prematurely. You're putting too much stress on it. You're not supposed to have that much of a bend angle on a brake line. It should be a nice, smooth flowing brake line. So we're going to attempt to go ahead and remove the caliper. That way we can go ahead and rotate our brake line properly back into place. Now, that's provided they didn't screw this up. Now, I don't think they touched this, but who knows what the hell they touched. And, you know, look at this. This is the result of the previous mechanic. So yeah, let's hope for the best. So what we're gonna do is get a 14 mil. We're gonna peel this caliper off and then try to straighten this hose out. We're gonna get this clip here, smash it back into place, and yeah, then I'll rant and rave some more. Okay, boys and girls, so can't really get you a great angle in here. I've already taken the bolts off because I was rambling. With your bolts off, you're going to gently remove your caliper and then start twisting. You want to make sure that the hose is nice and stress-free. I think we may have some luck today. Yeah, there you go. So you can see there in the distance, it's a nice big loop. That's what we're looking for. Let's slide our caliper back on. Okay, so there we go. So it looks like they didn't touch that top bracket there. Thank God. Because it seems that the more shit that they touch, the more headaches I would have. Now all I need to do is get that sleeve clip. I'll show you what the caliper and hose look like together properly. Right here is what it should look like. You can see there our hose is nice and relaxed. It doesn't have a super tight bend angle, which means you're going to get optimal flow and you're not going to be stressing your brake hose out. Second thing is, you can see here, it's nice and free. It's not coiled up. When I disconnect it, it doesn't want to do a twisty thing or coil up on its own, which means that it is stress-free. Like our lives want to be, your brake hose should always be stress-free whenever you install it. If you have to fight it to get it into place, that's too much stress and you're going to break some shit. So it won't be a good result. Brought to you by a 1990 Mazda 323 BG chassis. Love that fucking car. As you can see, it's still giving me rewards till today. It's only been about 20 plus years, but hey, whatever. Great car, isn't it? One day I'll actually do a video on that thing and show you guys my Mazda and tell you some stories about it. Where'd I put my hammer? Grab the hammer and begin hammering. And there, boys and girls, is how the job should have been done in the first place. To the mildly retarded mechanic, I hope that you someday come across this video and cease to call yourself a mechanic, because you're not. But you have the ability to learn, my friend. You can overcome your stupidity. You can get better and do a better job. All right, let's put the bolts on this caliper before I end up looking like the other stupid mechanic. In case you're wondering, boys and girls, these two relatively brown looking bolts are the caliper bolts, and you're going to now reinstall them in the car and torque them to 48 foot-pounds or 65 Newton meters. I should have ran this shit up. God, it's gonna be much easier for you guys at home because you won't have to do it overhead because you won't have a camera in the way. I mean, I could have got an extension, but who wants to walk over the toolbox? That's just stupid, right? So, boys and girls, the drama does not stop here. We have the junction point right here, and this is, of course, where the little brass box is usually. They cut that out and put in unions, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The only issue is that sometimes these bolts tend to break. There's a 12 mil that holds this bracket in. This bracket holds in your e-brake cable, and this here, this little lonely black wire is your ABS sensor. Now, ABS sensors are not very cheap and they're not fun to change, especially on these things, because rust tight is a real pain in the ass. And what that means is more cost for you at home. So using the ABS sensor as a support to hold in your emergency brake cable is a bad idea, especially when there's nothing wrong with the bolt hole that holds the bracket. I wouldn't have even mentioned this if there was a zip tie freaking holding it. I probably just would have replaced it with a bolt, but the fact that there was nothing holding it, it's like, dude, come on, man. So what we're gonna do is same thing. We're gonna cut the zip tie out of there, attempt to bolt this thing back up depending on how much rust tight has formed in there, because I don't have a tap that's small enough to get in there, and we're obviously not gonna drop the tank to do this. And then we're gonna cut out the remnants of the brake line, or at least bend it out of the way so it's not touching stuff that doesn't want to be touched. Go ahead, pull the zip tie out. Don't hit the camera. And just move stuff out of the way gently. As you can see, the bracket that holds our this thing, ABS thing, is busted. So we're gonna end up zip tying this guy to this bracket so that it's nice, safe, and secure. That's the way the ABS sensor gets that nice fuzzy feeling of security. Let's bend this shit out of the way. Make sure your tetanus shot is up to date. whenever working in the rust belt, because that shit is all over the place. You know what? Let's just bend it up in there. See, correcting people's mistakes is not, the worst thing, but at least, well, you know what? At least I have a good opportunity for public service announcement and something that you boys and girls can see at home as to what kind of bullshit we got to put up with in this trade from the other mechanics out there. I use that term loosely. Oh boy. I'm not a linguist, I'm a mechanic, okay? Tell me no bullshit in the comments. Just bend this fucker out of the way. Ugh. Had to employ the use of my strong hand there. And now we can try and jar this guy out of the way, get a 12 mil in there. You want to be very careful with the connections. Then we're going to have to pressure test this guy to make sure that it doesn't leak from anywhere. Okay, I'm going to go find a 12 mil bolt and a zip tie, and I will be back. So you remember that part in the video where I said we have to pressure test stuff? Well, that's on hold, boys and girls, because as you can see, we have a leak. So now we're going to have to build ourselves a brake line. And yeah, this job got so much more fun. Essentially, what I would do if this thing did not start to leak, I basically zip tie this guy because it's missing. We'd zip tie it to the bracket. I got this in there. There is quite a bit of rust tight. That's why the bolt isn't going to be tight, but at least it's going to hold it there. Unfortunately, I can't get it any tighter because it's going to break, and I can't tap the stupid thing because I don't have a tap that's small enough. It's like 1.5 inches. Anyhow, the reason why I sound so depressed is because of this. Brake lines suck. I'm not going to be filming that because I don't want to see it myself. So yeah, the process is basically we're going to cut the line off here. We're going to take this little flare nut out to see if we can reuse it. And then we're going to order a union like this and do this same thing up top there. Compression unions, as far as I know, are illegal in Ontario. So if you are planning on using that in the great state of Ontario or province of Ontario, don't, because if you get pulled over with the MTO, life's gonna suck. I mean, mind you, most of them probably won't know what they're looking at. Anyhow, that's a conversation for another day. Let's go ahead now and do an ending to this video. And like this thing has started to drip, the water from my eyes will start to drip soon as I work on this thing. So yeah, boys and girls, we'll see you back soon. Well, boys and girls, it's been quite a while since the last time I hit record on the camera. It has been a very challenging day. We not only had to deal with another car, but we also had to locate a union. This thing here in Ontario, like I said earlier in the video, I really can't remember what I said earlier because that was like, I don't know, 6-7 hours ago now. We had to find a union because in Ontario, compression fittings are illegal. It's not something that you want to use on your braking components. It's not the best of options, to be honest. They generally don't work very well, and a union with a bubble flare is the way to go. The problem is, locally, for some reason, a union is something that evades most of the parts people in my area, unfortunately, and it's not something that's common to come by. Of course, if you guys run into the same issue that tissues won't solve, what you can do, if you have any Subarus kicking around, you'll know that almost all Subarus have this here. This is a union for 2 lines underneath this section, actually, of the car. It's the back right corner of the car where you'll find this. I pulled this off of a Legacy, and we're able to do this brake job today instead of having the customer come back tomorrow. Even though it almost is tomorrow, and I should have probably just ended up going home and getting some sleep, we've got the car done. That being said, boys and girls, very important, if you are going to do this, make sure that you double check and triple check your lines for leaking. Of course, the one thing that sucks about doing a union in the car is that if you have a leak, you're not going to see it. So it is wise to go ahead and check the thing from time to time. That being said, we're going to go ahead and put back our bar in place. And yeah, if the other person who had done this job originally had just did the job properly and put a union in here instead of messing around with bullshit underneath the car, well, we wouldn't have dealt with the problem of rusted lines that are usually rusted on either side of the union. That usually is the problem. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, well, I'll try my best to explain it someday at another time, because, yeah, maybe ask me in the comments below. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead now, put the seat back and that brace and the little plastic piece that is here, and then I will show you the underside of the vehicle. Well, boys and girls, if you were crazy enough to attempt this job for whatever reason, well, you should end up with a result like this after putting your rear seat back in. I sincerely hope you are not crazy enough to attempt this job, because no one's gonna pay you for your tears. Boys and girls, go ahead, grab your torque wrench, set it to 72 foot-pounds or 98 newton meters. So boys and girls, you can see the remnants of the crap that we had to spray, brake clean. There is still some residue. Of course, I have checked it to make sure that it is not leaking. If you're crazy enough, again, to do this job, make sure you triple check stuff, like I said in the previous clip. Now, we'll show you where the junction is in the union and why there should have been a union inside of the car. That's how I usually do it. This here, boys and girls, is that line that we replaced. And I don't know why a lot of mechanics will utilize this here out of the body. I understand it's a bit more work, but it is always worth it to go into the body, put a union there, the same union that you get from Subaru when doing these rear lines. That's what I would have done if I was doing these brake lines from the get-go. Unfortunately, I wasn't the person doing them, and this has kind of left a sore taste in the customer's mouth as well as mine. It's sad to see the quality of work that people have to pay for out there. Rather pathetic, to be honest. It hasn't been longer than 6 months and the customer is now paying for a brake line repair again. Luckily, he's only paying for something and not going through any heartache with regards to an accident because of those rubber brake lines that was wearing away on the CV shaft in the back there. I sincerely hope that none of you people out there watching this have to face this sort of crap. It's unfortunate that my industry is the way it is, but it is very important for you to sort of understand what you're looking at. So let's go ahead and change the frame out and do my end screen, and that way I can rant a little bit more and then can send him on his way and you guys can click on another one of my videos. So boys and girls, moral of this video, please educate yourself and make sure that you trust the mechanic that you're going to. If you don't know much about cars, get someone or make a friend who knows something about cars. I know there's a lot of stupid information or misinformation out there, disinformation, whatever you'd like to call it. Unfortunately, this sort of stuff can cost your life, and in the grand scheme of things, your life is worth way more than a vehicle, and you don't want to cost yourself the opportunity of life because you don't know what the hell you're looking at. And as for the fanboys who have these project cars and whatnot, the just send it stuff is all fun and games until the shit hits the fan. Do what you're doing properly with some care and professionalism. Make sure you're taking care of your car properly. Don't just send it, as a lot of guys like to say. Yeah, it's all fun and games until your car is wrapped around a pole because your brake line snapped or your wheel came off because you were an idiot. Don't make that mistake. It's not worth it. Well, boys and girls, this has been a rather depressing, sort of somber video for me, unfortunately. I hope to God that you have found it entertaining, or at least pushed yourself in the right direction towards how you should think about car care. I don't mean to offend anybody, that's for sure. I understand that people don't know or aren't educated about certain things, but this is why it's important to sort of watch videos like this and help yourself along. You definitely don't want to have problems come up that you could have avoided. That being said, boys and girls, I sincerely hope that you find the video entertaining as well as informative. If you do, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss one of my new videos. And as always, thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one. Welcome back to the sweatshop. That sounded weird. Welcome back to the sweatshop, boys and girls. In today's video, I'm gonna be... The fuck am I doing? An NVIDIA aftermarket 3-inch fatback, or catback as it's popularly known. Why am I saying the same thing repetitively? It's so stupid. That doesn't sound right now. I fucked it up. So, boys and girls, for those of you who eyes... Now we have to discover what has been stroking the CV chat. Fucking focus, you cocksucker. Of course the camera doesn't want to work. Fucking, it's like the last mechanic who worked on this fucking car. Huh? Okay, it's not fucking focusing. The stress and headache, you got a fucking compressor. So, as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted by thy neighbor's compressor. By thy neighbor's compressor. It sounds like I'm fucking Bible school or something. They might have fucking camera's in the way, as usual. Anyhow, you end up with tissues. Wait, that's not how that saying goes, Jimmy. I should know it. I made it up. Fuck. Stupid. The good thing is I'm gonna cut all this bullshit out, and they're just gonna hear "ee" from the fucking torque wrench. Look, it took so long, the fucking wrench shut off. How am I supposed to do the top one, man? See, this is what they don't see. And I'm just fucking, you know, like a crackhead in here. Oh. Fuck. I can feel like fucking Stretch Armstrong. Come on, someone's got to subscribe when they see this part of the video. Oh, why is that not fucking, is it on? 43, you fucking bitch. Almost there, almost there. Oh, Lord. Because Rust-Tight is a motherfucker. I can't say motherfucker. We had to find a union for the... I don't know what the fuck I just said. I'm tired, boys and girls. I'm fucking exhausted. Okay, that's enough about me. I'm not making any fucking sense. This is the preferred effect that you should... Oh, it's redundant, and in the same fucking fashion I mix it up the first time, stupid. Of course, boys and girls, go ahead, grab your... Oh, God. See, this is what happens when you get fucking tired.